Okay. Great to see all of you here after afternoon tea. This afternoon we have a guest from Italy, Dr. Marta Caviglia. Dr. Caviglia is a medical doctor specializing in anesthesia and critical care. She's also a research scientist at the Cremedium, a research center in emergency and disaster medicine. Dr. Caviglia has been involved in several disaster medicine educational activities in Italy and in Europe. She is the project coordinator for the international course called Training Disaster Medicine for Trainers. She's also involved in research in the EU-funded projects called THREAT, which is Terrorist Attacks on Hospital, Risk and Emergency Assessment Tools and System, and the TIER program, which is an integrated strategy for CBRN threat identification and emergency response. She does most of her research projects in her country and in Europe, but also in low-resource setting, and including war zones. So she's very much experienced. She's been to Uganda and Iraq as well. And today we are very privileged to have her here to give us a workshop on innovative approaches to emergency and disaster medicine education. Thank you, Marta.
Okay, so thank you very much. I'd like to start by thanking the Hong Kong Academy of Medicine for the kind invitation. It's really an honor to be here, and also the Hong Kong Jockey Club Disaster Preparedness and Response Institute for supporting this workshop. So in the next hour and a half, I would like to share with you my experience in disaster medicine trainings and educations, the experience of my center. And so this is supposed to be a workshop, even though I'll be the one talking a lot. But please, if you have any question, any opinion, or if you want to share your experience, just feel free to interrupt me at any time. I will be ecstatically happy if you do that. So I'll skip this because I've already been introduced. I would like to introduce my center. My center is called Cremedium. Cremedium is a research center in emergency and disaster medicine. We are a WHO collaborating center, and we are located in the northern part of Italy, in a little city called Novara, which is in between Milan and Turin. Our activities focus on research, education, and training in the field of disaster medicine and humanitarian aid, or humanitarian assistance. And since the very beginning of our creation, we've been very interested in the integration between emerging technologies, so the state-of-art technology, and research and education in disaster medicine. I will just give you a brief overview of our activities and our main interests. Then we will go a little bit deeper in some of our educational programs. So these are our main areas of academic education and trainings. And as you can see, all our programs embrace the all level of medical education, starting from medical students and nursing students, going up to healthcare professionals, and then to policymakers and leaders and disaster managers. Our main areas of research include professionalization of healthcare workers, which is kind of a hot topic nowadays, no? And we will discuss a little bit deeper about this. Also, we do some operational research in disaster setting and humanitarian settings. Since we are so interested and we've been working a lot with simulation and technologies, we also do research on that, and also about hospital and disaster resilience. So, before starting, I would like to get to know, my audience a little bit more. Would you please, since this is supposed to be a workshop, so very interactive, would you please raise your hand if you have any familiarity with the topic of disaster medicine or disaster medicine education at all? Okay. Yeah, okay, good. So in the next slide, I'm gonna just show you some very basic terminology so we can set the standards of what we are talking about and we can sort of speak the same language. But before that, I would like you to just take out your smartphone or any device you have and go on this website. Okay, so if you're connected, we will build our word cloud here. What is a disaster? So we are looking for the definition of a disaster. So with just a few words, you can just write it and send it over, and words should be appearing there. Someone sent it already? Okay, terrible incident. Suffering human. Yeah, a lot of words. Okay, so we can see that some big words are coming out of the cloud, which are incident, big, casualty, loss, capacity. Now we have casualty. We will wait a little bit for causing, predicted, impact. Okay, I think we are almost done, right? So as you can see, this is a pretty messy cloud, no? I don't think any of you give the same definition as the others. So yes, there are some words that keep repeating, and some of them actually are connected with the term disaster. So we have impact, we have incident, we have large, we have casualty. But what we can take out from this cloud is that when you ask people the definition of disaster, when the definition is codified and the terminology is there to be known, people actually don't know what a disaster is, or better, they don't use the correct word to define it. There is a sort of confusion about the definition of disaster. Okay, so this is the definition, the terminology that was defined by the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. This terminology was published last year with a list of terminology connected to the disaster medicine and disaster risk reduction. And so a disaster is defined as any event that causes a serious disruption in the functioning of a community or a society. And this serious event causes human, material, economic, and environmental losses and impacts. There is also an addition to this definition that I like very much, because it brings to my mind this image of the balance. No? So a disaster, the effect of a disaster, may test or exceed the capacity of a society to cope with it with the resource available at the moment. So as you can see, a disaster is a situation, an acute moment, where the need of a population are so high and the resources available are so low in comparison, that of course it becomes very obvious to me that we cannot have the same standard as we have every day in our medical work. We have to change a little bit our focus. So from doing what's the best for everyone, that is what we do in our clinical work, no? We invest all our resources in one person, MRI, CT scan, everything to find out the diagnosis and the treatment. Well, in this situation, we cannot, because the resources are not enough. And when the resources are not enough, we need to learn them wisely. And from the best for everyone, we go to the best for the most. Given the fact that the resources are not enough, in a disaster situation, what is required is international assistance. So there should be a mechanism, an international mechanism of coordination that when a disaster strikes, work, and should work in an effective way. Often the term emergency, it is used in a sort of interchangeable way with the term disaster, but actually emergency is something that is qualitatively different from a disaster. Because even though in emergencies, let's think about mass casualty events like train accidents or car crash, or even in some cases bombing, no? Marathon Boston bombing. Even if in those situations we can have this imbalance, because in that acute moment the needs are very high and the resources are very poor, but the society, I mean the community, by mobilizing the resources, the neighboring resources, and by activating emergency plan, can cope with that in a, let's say, limited amount of time. So it is very important to understand the difference between a disaster and an emergency, because even though there are some similar characteristics, the difference are what we want to emphasize. So why it is important to talk about disaster medicine and why disaster medicine education is so important? First of all, because disasters are increasing. This is the annual disaster statistical review from the MDAT database. And as you can see, in the last 20 years, the number of disasters has increased, and so it has the number of people affected by them. And if we stretch out this throughout the century, the past century, we can see that the increase is quite obvious. Of course, this is due also to the increased number of disasters reported. No? We started to be more interested, we started to have more data than in respect to the beginning of the century. But also we know that there are some other variables. Those being, again, I'm being very obvious, but climate change, overpopulation, overbuilding, pollution, in urbanization, so all these variables that can affect hazard exposure, vulnerability, and the coping capacity of our society, thus increasing the risk of disasters. One other thing that I want to focus your attention on is that when we think about disasters and disaster medicine and disasters management, the first thing that comes in our mind, the first picture that we have, and also the first picture shown by the media are these ones, no? Acute destruction, immediate help needed. And this would be the response phase in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, which is a very important phase. But it's not the only part, the only phase of the disaster management. And again, going back to terminology, according to the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, disaster management is the organization, planning, and application of measures preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disaster. And I think this is very well emphasized by the disaster cycle. And as you can see, the response phase occupies only 1/4 of the pie. The rest of it is about mitigation, preparation, and recovery. And those interventions, being preparation and preparedness, are becoming more and more important than response in itself in terms of morbidity and mortality. So this is what literature is telling us. So if we are talking about disaster medicine, we need to talk about a discipline that includes different areas, being those disaster incident management, public health, and clinical medicine. And disaster medicine would be in the center. And these are the competencies that our disaster medicine expert should have. But bear in mind that when I say clinical medicine, I'm not just talking about emergency medicine. I'm not just talking about surgery or anesthesiology. I'm talking maybe also about a psychological first aid. And when I'm talking about disaster incident management, I'm not just talking about command and control or coordination. I'm talking about how to deal with media in an effective way, how to do press conferences in the acute situation of a disaster. So all these competencies should be taught to those people who want to be and will be disaster medicine expert. But disaster medicine, and this is one thing that I really want, like if you ask me which one is the take-home message of your lecture, is this one. Disaster medicine is not an ultra-specialized topic, okay? We don't need only disaster medicine experts. We need that cardiologists and dermatologists that work in their hospitals know the basic of this discipline, because disaster can happen every day and in every place, not only in low-resource countries that are already suffering from some threats. So we want also that disaster medicine is available for those people. Of course, the type of disaster medicine that we teach them is different, is tailored with different learning outcomes. But this, again, is not enough, because we have also medical students, undergraduates. And it is important, very important, that medical students have access to disaster medicine basic competencies and concepts during their medical school. And not just because they will be future doctors, so potentially dealing with these threats, but also because they are important during their medical school journey at the community level for community awareness. We were collaborating with this association of medical students in Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis, and they were very important at the community awareness level, just going around and teaching people in the villages about prevention measures, about the myths and the facts regarding Ebola. So they are a key, they could have a key role, and so that's why we are pushing and pushing and pushing to have disaster medicine inside the medical curriculum in medical schools. So this is what the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction that took place about 3 years ago in Japan says, that we need to focus our attention in enhancing the resilience of our national and international health systems. So by doing this, we need to educate and train all the healthcare professionals, including the medical students. Unfortunately, this is the state of art. So literature at the European level, but also at the international level, is telling us that there is a lack of awareness and education among community and medical students. And this lack of awareness at that level translates in future professionals that are not prepared to deal with disasters. And the worst part of this is that there is no explicit interagency standards, even though WHO and the scientific community is working to achieve that. What do I mean with no explicit interagency standards? Again, when we think about disasters and the response phase, I think, at least when I was younger, I had this image of a brave young doctor, full of goodwill and good intention, just backpacking, jumping on a plane and going to a disaster setting and saving lives. But this is completely wrong. We don't need just good intention. We don't need just people willing to help. We need professionists. In those situations, we need people that studied, people that are doing things according to what is evidence-based. And this is not enough. We need that these people, often working with NGOs, accomplish to the international standards that are set by UN or whatever. But there are also good news. And the good news are that the same literature that is telling us that we are lacking in so many ways is telling also that there's a high willingness to fill this formative gap. So students want to know about disaster medicine. They want to be engaged. And also, there's a strong belief that further professionalization is needed. And that's why WHO is working so hard. That's why the scientific community is working to professionalize those people. In our center, throughout the years, we've been developing a number of programs and educational programs for all the 3 different levels that I've been talking to you about. So for disaster medicine experts, we have the European Master in Disaster Medicine. For healthcare providers, we develop a training which is called the Humanitarian Medic. And then for medical students, we have the Training Disaster Medicine Trainer, which is the project that I'm currently coordinating. I just want to show you briefly what am I talking about. So the TDMT, the Trained Disaster Medicine Trainers, is a course that we developed together with the International Federation of Medical Student Association, so the IFMSA. And the goal here is to create a future generation of trainers, so medical students able to come to Italy, receive a training, that go back to their home university, and be able to deliver basic courses to their peer, to fill that formative gap that exists, and somehow try to solve these situations. So this is more or less how the course works. We select every year 20 medical students. We train them. There is an online phase and then a residential phase. And after passing the exam, they are certified trainers. And they will be able to deliver peer-to-peer course in their home universities. And I'm not talking about giving them special skills in disaster management. That is not the goal. The goal is always awareness at that level, is to give them basic knowledge. And the peer-to-peer education that has been known in the literature with different names, one is peer-assist learning, has proved to be a very effective way and with outcome comparable to conventional education. And also has some added values, those that go under the name of cognitive congruence and social congruence, meaning that both the student trainers and the trainee, they come from the same environment, they come from the same social structure, they come from the same knowledge, so they speak the same language. And also, the fact that the student is delivering a training, let's say that among the students there is a sort of a better attitude, no? They are more interactive, they are more involved, they are not afraid to make stupid questions, and they're very keen on being trained. The second project, it's called Humanitarian Medic, and we deliver it together with Médecins Sans Frontières, so Doctors Without Borders. And the goal here is to train residents from different medical specialties, specifically anesthesia, emergency medicine, and pediatrics, to adapt the skills that they already have, because we don't pretend to teach them how to be anesthesiologists. That's for their college, no? To teach them. But we learn how to adapt the skills that they have to a low resource environment, to those settings that require lack of drugs, for instance, or that are characterized by constraints. So this would be how the humanitarian health professionists will be. So a shared court of humanitarian competencies and skill-specific competencies adjusted for resource-poor settings. The last program that I would like to share with you is the EMDM. The EMDM is the European Master of Disaster Medicine, which is basically a Master of Science. So the students, yes, they need how to, like the basic principle of disaster management, but also they need how to do research in disaster setting. And this is very important, because if we want disaster medicine to be an academic discipline, it has to be based on evidence-based literature. So doing research in that setting is very important. And as you can see throughout the years, the number of disaster medicine articles published on PubMed increased. And this is very important because education and research, again, in disaster medicine, they are connected. And this is inevitable. Unfortunately, it's very hard to do research in disaster medicine settings. And that's because of the setting itself. So it's quite impossible to do randomized controlled trial in a disaster setting. And all the literature that we have, almost, a lot of the literature that we have is most anecdotal, no? It's more case studies. But what we need is more constructive literature on what we can base our training activities. So this is more or less the backbone of our courses. All of our courses have an e-learning phase that could last from 3 months up to 6. They have then a residential phase, and in the residential phase, we focus a lot on simulations, and then they get the certificate. One thing that we have to bear in mind is that we are talking to adults. So our approach in education has to change from what we call pedagogy, so a type of approach that is focused on the teacher, because it's the teacher that completely manages and decides what is important or not to know, and the children usually is passive, is just receptive. So we have to switch from this approach to the andragogy. So a more learner-focused education that is characterized by active inquiry. Andragogy is just one of the main adult learning theory. I'm sorry, this slide is a bit crowded. Let's just try to go through it very briefly. So andragogy was theorized in the 80s, and the main point is that adults filter everything that we tell them with their experience. So they bring their experience to guide them along the journey of learning. And the andragogy theory says that these 6 issues differentiate how a child learns from how an adult learns. So adults need the knowledge, need to know what they are learning, and they have an inner motivation when they think that what they are learning is useful. And they have a high willingness also to learn, and as I said, they filter everything that we say through their experience. Also, they want to self-direct, so they will learn only what they are interested in. And they will pay attention only to what they are really interested in. And also, there is an orientation to learning, meaning that they have to do things. They have to have learning outcomes, and they have to know them. Another adult learning theory is the one of the self-directed learning that is sort of derivative from the andragogy one. And it's an approach where the students take ownership of their learning, meaning they are the ones setting their goals. They are the one that select their learning style and how they want to learn their learning goals. And then they also self-evaluate, and they operate self-reflection of what they have been learning. And then we have experiential learning, which is basically the learn by doing concept. So the essence of adult learning is making sense of an experience. And this is the cycle of experiential learning, so how an adult learns. Going from experience, then reflecting about what they've learned, generalizing it, and then planning. So, as I said, andragogy, self-directed learning and experiential learning, together with also other theory, because we have also transformational learning and neuroscience, they're all part of these adult learning theories, because there's not just one adult learning theory, there are several, just looking from different perspectives. And I'm not here to say which one I think is the best or which one I think one should use. I'm here to say that, as in everything in life, just take what you think is better from each of these theory and apply it to your disaster medicine education program. Because at the end, all of this theory are saying that we need to address the perceived learning needs. We need to choose the instructional strategies according to what is the learning context, and then we need to choose the technology according to what is the instructional strategy that we chose. So what I personally take out from all this theory is that when we are talking about adult learning, we are talking to people who already have experience, who will need to validate what we are saying, who will decide from themselves, and also could be used as a resource from the teacher themselves and for the fellow learners. So it is important when we are dealing with them to involve them actively and to serve more as a facilitator than as a professor, as a teacher, and recognizing their expertise, encouraging them to share their experience, and also, this is important, explaining them what we are going to tell them, what are the learning objectives that they are going to achieve. So this is what Confucius said. It is a very nice quote. Tell me and I will forget. Show me and I may remember. Involve me and I will understand. And this is Confucio, not Steve Jobs, not Mark Zuckerberg. So maybe sometimes we think we are innovative, but maybe not as much as we think we are. So if we are following this learn by doing approach, well, in this case, simulation comes in handy, you know? We had just a session about simulation, and I'm not going to repeat what it's already been said there, but simulation, it's important in the learning experience, not only because it gives the chance to practice and practice all over again, but also because it can lead to the development of automatic action, which in disaster setting and emergency settings are very important. Because if you think about the brain of someone that is involved in this context, this is more or less what will happen, no? There will be a part for emotions that would be sadness, anxiety, fear, then cognitive, so information overload, and then less risky choice, and then timing, stress, under pressure. And then there is this small room for automatic action. That is what can save lives and save times. So all those things that come from the routine, the previous experience, that created the behavioral patterns that we just automatically do. And that's because we simulated. That's because we did it already 1,000 times. And we learn from our mistake, and we learn from our debriefing. So the automatic action, as I said, are the ones who save time. And if we don't have them, what can happen is that the action delays, or even worse, we freeze. And when we freeze, we lost time and we lose life. So in our courses, the simulation that I'm going to show to you are used mainly for the response phase of a disaster and mass casualty event. I'm not going through the more clinical ones with mannequins, but I'm gonna just focus on the one about coordination and communication within the team, and also some specific individual tasks. So all the simulation, the approach that we use follows the so-called building block approach that is present in the WHO simulation exercise. And basically it says that we start with basic and specific exercise to test specific aspects. And then the simulation becomes bigger and bigger and more complicated. So from tabletop to drill to functional exercise to full-scale exercise. The first simulation tool that I'm going to show you is the XVR software. And I know that here the Hong Kong Jockey Club for Disaster and Response Institute has it and use it. The XVR, for those of you who doesn't know it, it's a simulation software that allows you to recreate a 3D scenario of a brand new accident that you want to create, or even an existing one that you want to recreate. And in this scenario, the students can move and can complete meaningful tasks. So this is used for individual training. For instance, if we want to assess the triage accuracy, or for team training, which is the communication within the team, the division of tasks, the accomplishment of some specific tasks. This is just a small video that can show you how does it work. For instance, this is about the triage. So the students move around in a 3D scenario, and then through a triage card, they perform the triage. In this case, we were assessing the use of the STAR triage. And in the second video, I'll show you the team training. So we had we have also the volume. We had a class, and we asked them to manage the first 20 minutes of an MCI. And as you can see, we had two facilitators, one moving around, giving instruction, and working as firefighters or police. And then the other one, that was me, at the server. The server allows you to modify the environment according to the decision made by the students. And also, the other task that I had to do was to collect some performance indicator in order to conduct a structured debriefing after the exercise. So the aim of the XVR on site it's multiple. So we can either do some interactive teaching, we can train an exercise, or we can use it to evaluate. And the evaluation would be done with the same performance indicator that students were trained to use during the training and exercise. As I said before, education is nothing without research, so we did also some research on these simulation tools. And in particular, we wanted to see if virtual reality and live simulation, when compared for assessing the triage accuracy, were comparable. So we had two groups. On day one, Group A had to perform triage in a live simulation, and Group B in a virtual reality simulation. Then on day two, they had a lecture about triage, and then on the third day, we swapped the group, and again, they had to do triage. And what we saw is that in terms of triage accuracy and time to completion, in both cases, so in the live simulation and in the virtual reality simulation, both groups did better than in the first time, and that virtual reality simulation compared with live simulation had equivalent ability in assessing MCT skills, MCT being mass casualty triage. We also use the XVR software to compare two different methodologies of pre-hospital triage, those being the SACO method and the STAR triage. You know that in the pre-hospital system, like worldwide, is still a debate which method is better than the other, and literature has shown that no one it is. So we tried and we failed because the results say that there is no difference, but still we used the simulation to prove that. And what we did was to recreate an accident that happened in Los Angeles, was a train crash, and with the same number of victims, same type of injuries, and then ask the students to triage them using one or the other method. Another use that we did of the VR simulation was to create an hybrid training. The hybrid training was created for the Ebola deployment together with Save the Children. And here the issue was to create those automatic actions that we've been talking about. So the people, before being deployed to the Ebola treatment center, they had the chance to go through the actual treatment center that was rebuilt 3D, wearing the PPE. And the wearing the PPE was done all over again to avoid mistakes once there. And this is an example of how simulation can recreate a safe environment where you can test and train some abilities that, if you fail on the scene, can cause some harm to you. The second software is the IC. IC is, again, a software that allows for more team management and whole disaster management of a scene. It's based on 3 layers, so we have the dispatch center layer, the hospital layer, and then the pre-hospital layer. More or less, it works like this. So with the IC software, you can take any region of the world, recreate it on the software, and put the exact number of resources of your region. Number of hospital, number of ambulances inside the hospital, number of doctors on call and on duty, number of ventilators, everything you can think. Not only about hospital, but also about other agencies. So you can put the police station with the number of police, the firefighters, because remember that the response is always an integrated response. So it has to include other agency and other people from different area. So more or less, this is how it will work. So this is Hong Kong, and if I click on the police, it will appear another layer with the police station, and inside that, the number of resources available. Again, if we go back to the map and we click on a hospital, what appears is the floor of the hospital, or the number of floors, and the number of resources available. So if we zoom in, again, we can have the number of doctors, the number of patients already there, and then the number of resources. How it works, you mobilize them and you organize them to respond to a mass casualty event. And the mass casualty event will appear on the map, and will be something like this. This we created using the XVR, but could be just a picture of an accident with the number of victims and the resources coming to the scene. And this is on real time. So we would have 3 different scenes: the pre-hospital team working on this scenario, the hospital team working on the hospital scenario, and then the dispatch center working on the map, each of them having a different role in the disaster chain. And I'll show you a brief video. This is a very complex simulation. It takes time to manage and time to organize. But it's pretty fun.
Va bene, senta.
Can we get the ambulance and assistant?
Okay, so
Okay. So the aim of this software is, as I said, to train and exercise both in the preparedness and planning phase and in the response phase. And actually, we also used it in this particular region of Italy, which is called the Lombardia region. There, the pre-hospital system asked us to support them in using the software and training their trainers to use the software. And they use it every year to evaluate the response plan in case of an MCI. So we just basically recreated the exact number of resources available in the region, that is the Lombardia region. And yeah, they're using it to train all the agency involved. But sometimes simulation tools and software can be very expensive. And most of the time you can achieve what you are looking for with simulation, even with easy tool. And this is what we do with medical students. Also because medical students in our program are supposed to go back to their universities and to their home countries, which sometimes happen to be low-income countries. And they want to use their simulation with the students, but sometimes they just don't have the resources. So in this case, tabletop simulation can exactly reproduce what we saw in the IC software. You just need papers and map and some creativity. So you can see this is the simulation we ran in the TDMT last year. We have the pre-hospital team and just a map and some puppets representing the victims. Then we had the dispatch center team coordinating the whole response using a map of the area and having a sheet with the resources available. And then the hospital team managing the hospitals. And this is how the whiteboard of the dispatch center looked like after whole exercise. The last type of simulation that I want to talk to you about is the most complex one, and also the one with the greatest rate of immersivity, which is the real-size simulation. We run a big real-size simulation. Actually, we run more than one, but this is the biggest one that we run during the EMDM, so the European Master in Disaster Medicine. After the 2 weeks of residential, we have this final simulation that not only includes the students of the master, but also all the entities and agencies at the community level. So we will have the firefighters, we will have the whole pre-hospital agencies, we will have the police department, and also the military that support us. And maybe, if some tech help comes, I can show you a video of the simulation we ran last year. You can just click here, and then the YouTube video will appear. Here.
Good luck.
Okay, so here we are safe. What is the chemical?
All'interno al sicuro adesso.
So as you can see, the real-size simulation, they seem very big, they're very hard to organize, but they have a huge impact on the students. And they goes from the clinical response to the integrated response at the disaster management level. What maybe you've noticed is that, of course, we use standardized victims, and those standardized victims are medical students. And these medical students actually are dynamic, meaning that they have a casualty card on them. That casualty card has some parameters, but then also we give them a sort of storyboard. The storyboard has their injury pattern and how it will evolve according to the treatment received, but not only the time of the treatment received. So they could improve or not according to how well the doctor did. And they don't just need to evolve, but they also need to report this so that we can have data on this. And we can, in the debriefing that we conduct later, show to the students how well or not they behave. The thing about data that I'm always stressing out, it's very important that we've been focusing on it a lot. We even developed a software which is called Disaster Simulation Suite that is used to collect data real time. So during every simulation we run, we have observers and data collectors that just move around the scene and with their own device collect some performance indicators and some data. And we also publish something about these performance indicators that we normally use. So that would be evaluated using the accuracy and the time. Yeah, those are valid both from the pre-hospital setting and also in the hospital setting. So, to conclude this, simulation is important, mainly because we are talking about adults, and adults prefer the learn by doing approach. Simulation is important, but the briefing is the real part where the comprehension takes place. So it's the most important part of the learning process. And objective debriefing is even more effective and efficient. So what I suggest to everyone who wants to deliver a course in disaster medicine, as much as you focus your attention on the preparation of the training exercise, focus your attention and take some time to prepare an objective debriefing, because this is where the reflection and all the critical thinking takes place and the actual learning takes place. I want to conclude just with a small reflection that I had yesterday coming over here in my flight. That was an 11-hour flight, so very long. So you can imagine I had a lot of time to eat, to watch movies, and to think. And I was thinking, so they asked me to do this speech about innovative approaches, but what does this mean? What is innovation? Where does the innovation, where is the innovation? So I start thinking, yes, we are using the state-of-art technologies in both in a traditional and non-traditional way, and this could be considered innovative. We are applying different educational methodologies into the same educational programs to enhance what it is the students' understanding and learning through a meaningful experience, being those the simulations. And also, we are always trying to redefine the learning objective to evolve a little bit. But this was not enough. There was something missing. So I was bored on the plane, I was looking for the movie to watch, and I just happened to see this TEDx. And the title was The Art of Innovation. So I said, that's amazing. I'll just have a look at this. And this guy is very, it's awesome. If you don't know it, just look up in the YouTube and see his speech. I was very inspired, and I was so inspired that I thought at the end of my speech I will just throw out some concept and see if maybe also other people will be as inspired as I was. So among the concept that he explains about the art of innovation, these three got my attention, and I tried to apply them to the work that we do every day in our research center. So the first one is make meaning, as opposite of make money. So make meaning, it means that you really want to do something meaningful. It means, to me and to the work that we are doing, it means to desire to change the world as it is now, desire to make a difference with the work that you are doing now. And I think that if you really truly want to make a meaning, that's the first step for innovation. Another concept that I like very much is the one about jump curves, so the jump curves concept. And it means that when you are delivering an educational program and you are a teacher, you sometimes have to jump to the next curve. So not just stay on the same curve and try to do the best thing 100%, but just try to evolve out of curiosity, out of creativity, and find new strategy. And the third one, it's called Let 100 Flowers Blossoms. And I think it's applicable to the training disaster medicine trainers that we do and the peer assist learning. Because sometimes when we teach them how to deliver these basic courses and how to run simulations, then the outcome surprises us because they always come up with new solutions and something more creative than what we did and something more effective than what we did. So that's the innovation inside the innovation, and I like this concept very much. So thank you for your attention.